My name is Will. I'm a running physio from the running room. I've asked my run club the top questions they have for running physio, and today I'm going to answer them. Let's get into it. First question, what running shoes would you recommend for beginner runners? Now, I don't have a single pair of running shoes that I recommend. What I suggest is for a runner to get a pair of daily trainers. Daily trainers are shoes that can do a little bit of everything. You can go long run in them, you can go speedy runs, you can do your easy daily miles. They're shoes that are comfortable, they're durable, and they allow you to do a bit of everything so you don't have to buy many pairs of shoes when you're just starting out. Personally, one of my favorite daily trainers are the Asics Nova Blast 3. They can do a bit of everything. They can do your race day, your long runs, your easy runs, your tempo runs. And they're super comfortable and super versatile. For a beginner runner, what you need is to prioritize actually just getting out for runs. You don't need 3, 4, 5 different pairs of shoes. You need one shoe that can do a bit of everything, so then you can go out and actually get those miles under your feet. And what I recommend is for you to do a bit of shoe review online, look up a few YouTube videos, and pick out a few pairs that you can go to your local running store and test them out on the treadmill and then see which one you like best and find the one that's most comfortable for you. Question number 2, why do you need a shoe rotation as a runner? So a shoe rotation is essentially having 2 to 3 different pairs of shoes in your wardrobe so you can rotate through them for different purposes. The benefit of having a shoe rotation is that by having shoes that are slightly different in the design, in the cushioning, in the heel drop, that changes how the forces are going up your body, and that helps to reduce overload related issues and niggles and injuries. Research actually shows that having 2 different pairs of shoes helps to reduce running related overload injuries because it shifts load around and helps reduce that overload to one certain part of your body. For example, you can have 2 different pairs of daily trainers. They're similar in terms of the purpose that you can do a bit of everything with, but they're slightly different in their design, in the cushioning, in the heel drop, so it shifts the load around slightly, and that helps to just offload certain parts of your body like your knee and your hips. So what you can also consider is having a race shoe, and for example, something like this, where it's got a carbon fiber plate to increase the rigidity of the shoe. You can go do your faster runs in them, you can do your race day in them, they'll just give you a little bit more oomph. They're not mandatory though. I say pick your daily trainers first, and then have these as a secondary pair of shoes. So question number 3, what are the top exercises to strengthen your knees? Great question. And again, I wouldn't say there's top 3 exercises you need to do to strengthen your knees, but when it comes to having healthy knees for running, you wanna make sure you got adequate quad strength. So things like your squats, your lunges, your split squats are great exercise movement patterns to include to strengthen your quads. You might also want to look at a leg extension to target that quad as well. Beyond that, what we also see in people with knee pain is that the knee is often a culprit for the ankle and for the hip. And what I mean by that is you want to have adequate hip strength to help control your knee in dynamic single leg stance. So for example, you want to be doing things like your single leg bridge, you want to do hip abductions, side planks, anything to work that lateral hip, that glute medius is going to help control your knee when you're hitting the ground in single leg. So to summarize, what you want is to have a well-rounded strength program that targets things like your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, and your calves, so you have sufficient strength and control in that part of your body to handle the forces of running. Next question. I'm getting Achilles pain as a runner. What should I do? Achilles pain, super common problem that we see in running. Your Achilles tendon is one of the biggest tendon in your heel and attaches up your calf muscle. Its job is to help push off and generate power with every step of running. And as you can see, it's one of the most important muscles for a runner. The Achilles tendon acts as a spring that propels forces. So you can imagine when you're running, you're taking a lot of steps in a single run. So it's one of the reasons why the Achilles can get a bit irritated and get a bit injured. If you're a runner and you're getting Achilles pain, the number one important thing is to find out what's changed that's leading up to the onset of pain. Did you start to do more speed work? Did you increase your volume or intensity too much too quickly? Or maybe you've changed your shoe from like a high drop shoe to a low drop shoe. These are some of the factors that can put a bit more load through your Achilles, and by understanding that, we can know what to modulate moving forward to help control your pain. With Achilles tendon pain, a lot of people might find that stretching feels good at the time, but actually what stretching does is puts a bit more compressive load to that tendon, and when a tendon's already irritated and sore, putting more compressive load by doing stretching doesn't really help it in the long run. What's actually going to help Achilles pain is to make sure you're strengthening the calf and the Achilles. Because when you strengthen the Achilles, you increase the tendon's capacity to handle load, so it's able to do more of what you're asking it to do. All right, next question. What are the most common mistakes that causes running injuries? First of all, injuries are individual and complex. There's different causes even for the same injury in a different person. But what I commonly see in the people I work with are three things. Number one, they're doing too much too quickly. So what I mean by that is maybe you're adding too much speed to work, you're adding the volume too much too quickly, and you're doing it in a way where you're exposing your body to loads that it's not able to handle just yet. You want to make sure you're building up the intensity and the volume gradually so your body is able to adapt and handle the forces. The second most common mistake I see is when runners don't do enough strength training. And I've said a bit earlier, strength training helps improve the capacity of your muscles in your tendon and improve its ability to handle forces and load. A lot of runners think that running is just enough for strength training, and whilst it does help to build a level of strength, you also want to supplement your running with resistance training, whether it's at home with weights and ideally at a gym. Strength training helps to improve your running economy and helps reduce injury by building resilience and strength and capacity in your tissues. And lastly, the third most common mistake I see in injured runners is when they're not giving themselves enough time for recovery. And recovery is a broad concept, but things like getting enough sleep, making sure you're eating adequately, you're eating the right macronutrients, and also just having enough time to rest in between your sessions, because exercise essentially is breaking down your muscles. And when you're resting and when you're sleeping, that's when your body comes to repair the muscles and adapt and actually gets it stronger. So if you don't have enough time in between the sessions, if you don't give your body the right environment for that repair process to happen, you go into a next hard session, you're not gonna get the most out of it, and you're just building up stresses, and that increases your risk of injuries. So make sure you're prioritizing your recovery. What are the best at-home exercise equipments from Amazon for runners? I wish I could tell you there's a top 3 best exercise equipments, but again, like many things, there isn't a best exercise equipment. The tools I like to use for strengthening purposes are, for example, mini bands or TheraBands. You can have them around your legs. You can do things like side abduction, side kicks, crab walks. These are really great exercises to target the lateral hips. You can also buy dumbbells and weights from Amazon that you can put at home, and you can use them to do a range of different exercises. And the point of having weights is just add a bit more resistance, a bit more overload to your muscles to help stimulate that adaptation, to stimulate strength gains. Apart from that, I always recommend a good pair of running shoes, and I always recommend a gym membership, because then you can do your strength training there in an environment where all the weights and equipment are there. You don't have to buy a couple of different dumbbells at home. All right, next one. I hear this very commonly actually. Is heel striking bad for you? What heel striking is essentially when you're coming into your running gait cycle, you're making initial contact with the ground with your heel. That's what we call heel striking. And often heel striking had been demonized because they think that increases your risk of injury. But in reality, what we know is that heel striking doesn't actually increase your risk of injuries. People often think you need to stop heel striking and move to a forefoot strike. There's pros and cons to both. Heel striking puts a bit more load through your knees and your hips, whereas if you're forefoot striking or midfoot striking, that puts a bit more load through your calf and your Achilles. So they're not good or bad, they're just different. When we see someone with a running related injury, changing the foot strike may be one of the things we can implement to change where the forces are going, but I would never advise someone who's heel striking to change your forefoot strike for no reason, because that can start to put a lot more load through your calf and Achilles, and that can create other problems that you don't need. I think heel striking is often mistaken for overstriding. And what overstriding is, same thing. When you're coming in to make initial contact with the ground, you're hitting the ground with your foot very far in front of your center of mass. And I'll say that's not quite as good, because you're applying a braking force that you have to overcome. Often when you overstride, you're landing the ground with a stiff knee and your quads is just not in the optimal position to receive force. And that can put a bit more stress to your knees and hips. And that may be one of the things that increases the risk of getting niggles and injuries to your knees. So if we can lessen your overstride by shortening your gait, that's gonna be a lot better in terms of building efficiency and reducing your risk of getting injuries. Personally, I'm a heel striker and I don't intend to change that. If you look at the research, actually a lot of long distance runners are heel strikers, so don't demonize heel striking. Overstriding, change that. Heel striking, you're fine. All right, next question. I lost count of how many there is, but it's why do runners need to strength train? Running is a repetitive sport where you're exposing your joints and your muscles to repetitive forces. And simply speaking, how injuries and niggles happen is when you're exposing your body to loads that's greater than its capacity. And what strength training does is increases your body's capacity to handle that load. So if you have a bigger tank, you're able to handle more load without running into issues. There might be a bit of confusion about what strength training is. And simply speaking, I say strength training are resistance exercises where you're challenging the muscles to create a movement under resistance. If you're doing, for example, a squat, you're holding a weight, you're getting up and down, doing a squat, and you're challenging your quads to create that movement. And you're making sure you're taking your muscles close to fatigue within a 4 to 15 rep range. And what strength training does is it tells your brain, hey, this movement is really tricky. I need to get my legs stronger, so next time I do it, I can do it better. And this creates a psychophysiological change where your muscles get stronger, your brain gets better recruiting those muscle fibers, and your brain gets better at doing that particular movement pattern. If you're a runner with better strength, you're able to handle more volume, you're able to handle more intensity, your muscles and joints have more capacity to do more, and they have greater load tolerance. So runners, you want to make sure you're doing strength training. Don't neglect that. Running is simply not enough to strengthen. You want to be hitting the gym. And this follows on nicely to the next question is, how many times a week should a runner strength train? I say that really depends on your current capacity, depends on your goals, and depends on a couple of other things. But simply speaking, I say at least 2 to 3 strength sessions a week is a good start. Once a week is probably not enough to make strength gains. 2 to 3 times a week allows you to hit the same muscle groups with enough intensity and frequency to create that physiological adaptation while still giving you time and energy to do your runs. The number of times for strength training might differ depending on whether you're training for a race, whether you're in that race block, or whether you're in your off season. So in your off season, that's the time away from your race block. You can think about strength training 3 times a week to actually build a bit more strength, and you might just want to hold your running steady. This is a great time for you to hit some PBs, to push a little bit harder with the weights. So by the time a race block comes around, you've already built up a nice foundational level of strength. When you enter your race blocks, typically that's 12 to 16 weeks before an event. Normally that's a time where your running picks up, your mileage picks up, your intensity picks up. So that's a time where you probably don't want to be hitting the gym really, really hard at the same time. You want to just maintain your strength and fine tune things as you go. Okay, next question. Will strength training make you too muscly and thus slow you down as a runner? Well, I think that's definitely one of the more common misconceptions I hear in runners who probably don't do enough strength training. They think if I hit the gym too much, it's gonna make me too muscly by accident and it's gonna slow me down. I think in reality, it takes a lot of work to build a lot of muscles to a stage where it actually slows you down. What I see more commonly, and especially in runners that come to me, are folks that probably don't do enough strength training and they just don't have enough strength and capacity and endurance in the muscles to handle the running that they're asking the body to do. And research has shown from time and time again that strength training helps running economy, helps running performance. So doing the right amount of strength training and doing enough strength training actually makes you faster and also makes you more resilient as a runner, which helps to reduce your risk of injuries. I say, generally speaking, for runners, your style of strength training should not mimic someone like a bodybuilder. You're not training for aesthetics, you're training more performance. So the style of training should reflect what your body needs to do. So a simple example would be, if you're a runner, you might want to prioritize a lot of single leg based movement, because running, you're essentially doing a series of single leg hops. You want to make sure you're strong and stable in single leg. You want to make sure you have adequate hip stability, you have calf strength and calf endurance, so that when you go to running, you have the right amount of strength in the body parts that you need. Whereas compared to someone like a bodybuilder, they're probably more training for aesthetics and hypertrophy. They might do a bit more upper body. As a runner, you probably don't need to do as much of that unless you want to. Your strength training should reflect what you need to do. And your strength training should be there to support your running, not to hinder away from your running. Cool, okay, we're almost there. Last question. How do you know if you should stop running because you're getting an injury or whether you should keep pushing on? Look, that is a great question, but it's also a tough question to answer because that's very individual and really depends on your history, what you're dealing with, what your goals are. But generally speaking, a lot of runners probably operate with a level of ache and pain because you're pushing your body hard, you're trying to hit the mileage, you're trying to hit that PB. Especially if you're training for a race like a half marathon, a marathon, you're doing many kilometers per week. So it's probably not uncommon for you to feel a level of muscular soreness. However, what I can say is if the pain is persisting longer than it normally does, if your pain is bad enough that it stops you from running or affects your day-to-day life, then that's probably a sign that you're doing a bit too much and you need to stop and reflect and see what's happening. My suggestion always is to make sure you're consulting a professional when it comes to running injuries, to make sure you get the right guidance and the right treatment plan moving forward, so you give yourself the best chance of healing whatever injury you're dealing with and give yourself the best chance at hitting your running goals. Running injury, and as a matter of fact, any injuries is complex, is individual, so what works for one person may not work for you. You want to make sure you get the right assessment and the right rehab planning moving forward so then you're not wasting any time and you're actually healing that injury properly. All right, folks, that is it for today. If you got any questions about running related injuries, my details are linked down below. If you got any questions at all, drop it in the comments. Make sure you click the like button, you click subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.